Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Joining me today is Billy Brandt and Colin Camper. On today's show, we're going to recap Invicta FC 15, as well as recap UFC Boston from this past weekend. And before we get to all that, we're going to go over some headlines. And guys, how's it going today?
Not too bad. A little tired, but not bad.
Better than Jadeep Singh.
All right, I am Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. He is Billy Brandt. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrandt21. Of course, Colin runs our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. We are on the hunt for 500 likes to give away some cool stuff. Maybe, I think it's right behind Colin's head, something that's direct from our friend AJ Hiller at MMASignaturesUSA.com. So if you're looking for a piece of history, hit him up. He's got more. I know he does because I asked him. So so that's how I know. All right. Well, let's get to headlines here on Beyond the Cage as we open the show before we get to the fight stuff. And one of the bigger headlines, and this was marked by the post-fight comment by Dominic Cruz this weekend. Kenny Florian has been suspended by Fox Sports as an analyst due to a oversight is what they're calling it. And reading an article by Ben Falks and the folks there at MMAJunkie.com, kind of getting more into this. Apparently, he was trying to look up some information on footwork and going to a guy by the name of Wiley. The full name, Lee Wiley. And he posted videos about boxing breaking down and technique. And it was going over some boxers from the 40s, I believe, in their footwork. And so how he found this video, I don't know. It's probably like finding Beyond the Cage. So he found this video, is breaking down and trying to compare to the footwork by both gentlemen fighting in Sunday's main event, and Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw, and uses some of the information from this video and writes it down. So it's not really a copy and paste. He had to watch the whole video and transcribe it. I've transcribed some of our interview videos before. It's tough. You gotta go back 5 times just to get one 15-second line. So it's first of all, it's tough just to get down the information that way. And then he said he just didn't link to the video, and then he didn't cite him or mention that it was this guy's video. Wasn't an oversight, I guess. Did Kenny Florian intentionally do this? Maybe not, but he didn't do his job correctly. I can tell you that much. And I think it's something, I think he handled a little wrong saying the only guy that would know that he got plagiarized was the guy that made the video. And that's not the point. The point is whether or not who gets upset by this. The point is, did you mention someone's work and not give them credit for it? That's the issue here. And that's what Kenny Florian did. And should he have gotten suspended? I think so. I don't think he should have got fired. Like I said, I don't think he was doing anything malicious. I don't think he was trying to harm the reputation of Lee Wiley, but he kind of messed up a little bit, and I think he should be suspended.
Yeah, it sucks because I like Kenny Florian. I like his analytical segments on Fox Sports. But, as a journalist, especially, you're coming over from MMA to become a journalist now, you really got to pay attention to what you're doing. Oversights, even if it was an honest mistake, you still can't afford to do something like that. And now that it's coming out that there's been some other claims against him over the past 4 or 5 years and everything about the things he's put out, it's just like, oh man, dude, what's going on? He's a good guy, but every good guy has some tendencies. So
Yeah, I like Kenny Florian, and I enjoy his work or whoever's work it is, but it's just, I don't know. I think he stepped into something that wasn't his world, and he tried. I think it was a little over him. And I mean, I don't know if it was intentional or not. I hate that they use oversight and then suspend him. I wish they would have just said
it did take him a while to suspend him as well.
Yeah, I wish they would have said what it was and then suspend him. Because when you say oversight, it makes it seem like a mistake. He came out, he apologized. Then we just move on. If it happens again, we deal with it. But they say, oh, it was an accident. We'll suspend you. Don't let it happen again. Who knows? But really all Kenny Florian can do is come out, he apologizes, and just see where he goes from here and not let it happen again.
Now, this leads me to the point is this is why I do the podcast in the video form like it is and why I don't write too many articles because of things like this. This is why, because I am terrified of one wrong thing said, and it looks worse than me just talking nonsense here on the show. And usually on the show, I try to give credit to the site I'm pulling up our information of. I almost always do, probably 99% of the time. Sometimes maybe I forget to mention it, but I almost always say, at least I'm getting it from an article. I'm not claiming some things as my own that aren't. So that is the mistake Kenny Florian made, and he has to pay the price. And some people are comparing it to the Chael Sonnen deal. It's different. Chael Sonnen got fired for something that wasn't related to being an analyst or journalist or media member. He got caught with steroids while still trying to actively fight. That's completely different than not crediting a source in a journalistic piece. Those are two different things. You can't really compare them.
Could you almost argue what K-Flow did was worse though? Because I mean, he's
absolutely,
because compared to Sonnen, like Sonnen, it makes sense for him to cut his contract, spend from the UFC, which they did.
Absolutely,
K-Flow, it's like this, you're not Chael Sonnen doing drugs, man, just to get better at the gym. Like you're taking journalistic integrity from your job as a journalist and kind of compromising it, and not just yours. That's the thing. It's like it's not just his integrity. It's the entirety of Fox Sports. We got to understand, like, they're owned by Fox, Big Fox. And
Right.
It's like for Big Fox to have someone who works for them kind of put their integrity on the line like that, it's like, that's a big deal.
No, absolutely. And I think it is a bigger deal than Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, I mean, for what it is, if you want to look at just for Fox, I guess you can say what they do in the ring and stuff matters. But what Chael Sonnen did was totally different to that. What Kenny Florian did directly affects when he's analyzing fights or anything. That's directly what he's saying on Fox. It affects. Chael Sonnen was a whole different story. There's really no way to compare them.
So there's a dual kind of conversation style article / interview on MMA Junkie between Ben Folks and Danny Downs, kind of going back and forth on this Kenny Florian issue. And I read the majority of it, and it's really good. Both these guys did a really good job kind of breaking this down, being fellow MMA journalists themselves. So I implore our fans to go check it out on MMAJunkie.com. I thought they did a great job with this piece, kind of go over in the nuances of this plagiarism punishment.
While we're on this real quick, how do we feel about the main event winner of UFC Boston's little shot at him? You think it was too much?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a friendly jest. I don't think it was done out of malice. Those guys have done too many pre-fight and post-fight shows together. I don't think there's any bad blood between those two guys. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was a joke, and that's how Kenny should interpret that.
Yeah, Cruz already came out and apologized for it and everything, but Kenny already said, like, no, man, I know you're just joking around. It's totally cool. It's funny kind of thing. So beef already squashed if there was any.
All right. I want to mention this real quickly because that's all it deserves. World Series of Fighting 27 has an event, and it's probably the worst event I've ever seen him put on. The main event's Teddy Holder against Shamil Gazmazov. Is that tuning people into NBC
I don't know.
Sports?
Their opening fight is a guy who's 0-1, so
that's always good. Also, former WEC and I think UFC fighter Carlos Fodor is on the card, so that's something, right?
I guess there's the draw power. Right
People
there.
don't know him, right?
Half that card doesn't have profile pictures.
Should they just cancel this card? No, I mean,
You should have.
are the fans in Memphis clamoring for World Series of Fighting?
I think they're just paying the fans to watch.
They might.
So
I honestly think if they open the doors free, they wouldn't fill half that arena or wherever it's at.
The FedEx Forum's a big arena. That's like an NBA arena. That's 20,000 seats. They're not selling. They're not getting over half capacity.
these dudes better have a lot of friends and family.
And here's the thing. They have to pay to rent out that arena, which I know for an arena that size is not cheap. It's easily, I would put it in the ballpark as somewhere, I would easily say 80 grand, maybe a little more. And that's just to rent the arena. That doesn't, any other additional cost or taxes or whatever. I would say at least 80, maybe even 100 grand, maybe more. I don't know. With
events like this, we're seeing the end of World Series of Fighting. There's no way you're losing money here. There's no.
I would just cancel it. I don't know if I think the money you would have to pay to cancel the event would probably be less than the loss you're going to take from not selling enough tickets and paying your fighters.
UFC canceled 2 events. If they can put on a fight like this, UFC has no excuse to ever cancel an event again. This is
so. Yeah, so if you you're probably gonna miss watching World Series.
I'm
fighting
gonna.
this
Unfortunately, I
weekend.
am gonna watch it just because
So-
I'm that kind of guy. But I'm not expecting anything.
I guess
crazy.
their one caveat: there's no other fights coming up this weekend, so they're hoping maybe
right.
someone will tune this on.
I mean, yeah, I would expect this would be like if you go and watch a local MMA fight, basically. Like
That's basically what it is.
some of the fighters on there, it's like their first pro fight.
I'll probably turn it on if like Law and Order SVU isn't on or something. So
Now, World Series of Fighting 28 will at least have Marlon Moraes coming up
right.
in a few weeks, so maybe they'll be around long enough for that fight to happen. So we'll see. Let's continue on here with headlines. I wanted to mention this not so much for the fight itself, as announced that a May fight night in Brazil will feature the main event against Jacare Souza and Vitor Belfort. I think it's more what's happening with the next middleweight top contender. Now, of course, we know Yoel Romero tested positive for something. We don't know what following his win over Jacare in December at UFC 194. Suspension is still pending by the USADA, and
They did remove him from the rankings though.
right. So to me, he's gonna get suspended.
Yeah.
So now we thought maybe Jacare, the guy that just lost to him, a close split decision, might get the nod to rematch Luke Rockhold, rematch from the Strikeforce days. But obviously, that's not going to happen. Jacare is now going to take on Vitor Belfort. So with that happening, does that pretty much mean that Chris Weidman gets a rematch at Luke Rockhold? Who's the other viable contender? Because Rockhold said he would like to fight by UFC 198, which by the numbering would either be April or if they're going to hold it out till May, it would be April, May, somewhere around there,
Right.
with UFC 197 coming in early March. So if Rockhold would like to fight by then, they got to find a contender rather quickly.
Right.
And besides Chris Weidman, who else would be ready to go in that amount of time?
Well, Luke Rockhold is flying out to London for the Bisping Silva fight. You could argue the shot there. People have gotten title shots for less. I think the hard one arguing would be Silva Rockhold. I mean, people would love to see it, but obviously Silva doesn't have like a tear. But no one really in the division is on a tear right now. That's the problem. But if Bisping beats Silva, I think he totally earns a shot. I mean, he beat Anderson Silva. That's a real. No one's given Bisping a chance to beat him, and I think it could come just by decision. But I mean, you could argue a rematch between Bisping and Silva because it's totally marketable. You could argue a fight between Rockhold and Silva because it's totally marketable. Chris Weidman, I still think he needs time to heal up and everything. It's only been a month, and for them to announce within like the next month or so that he's going to be fighting Rockhold would just probably be too much. So I think it's going to be one of those guys.
I would honestly rather. I don't want a Weidman rematch. I don't, but I would rather see that than the winner of Silva and Bisping. Bisping kind of got trashed in that Rockhold fight. Silva, he got popped for steroids, and in that last fight back, didn't even look that great, And now he's going to come in clean at what, 40?
Gustafsson got KO'd and then fought for the title. KO'd brutally.
I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying I wouldn't like it to.
Oh yeah.
As a fan, I wouldn't enjoy either of those matchups anymore. I think Weidman would be more competitive than both of them.
Yeah. Well, also Talis Leites is also on that card fighting.
Yes, Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah,
yep.
that'd be. I think if Talis Leites pulls a win there, that'd be a fun fight.
And also, I'm not counting Romero out because I know they're removing him. They're looking at it, but that whole Crow Cop thing kind of made me weary the whole thing when it comes out and then he doesn't test. So we'll see. Maybe there still is a chance.
True.
Maybe there's a chance Robbie Lawler moves up, a la Conor McGregor.
Right. Well, how long is the
Decides to
first
fight
suspension
Luke
though?
Rockhold.
For was it 3 months, 90 days, or 6 months, or something like that for
For-
popping for steroids or getting caught? Because was it out of competition too?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think out of
so.
competition
That's
is only
a little
3 months.
lower of a.
I think
thing.
out of competition is only 3 months.
And maybe that's what they're waiting for.
And
to see whether he gets a
retroactively,
reduce.
Yeah, he would be even cleared to fight retroactively like March, so he could probably be ready for April, May.
Well, like I said, unless it's like I said a harsh suspension, it
Right.
could make the middleweight division kind of cloudy.
And I don't think you get that harsh of one. I mean, he's sort of where was he tested positive at? Was it Vegas?
The fight was in Vegas, so it would have been out of competition, I
Oh,
believe, with
over in Florida is where the out of competition probably
right.
would have
I think
taken
it probably
place.
would have been between his Machida win and the win
Right.
over Jacare. So
Yeah.
sometime
Somewhere-
in between that he was tested.
Yeah, because someone said it's possibly a designer steroid, which Florida is known for, and he trains out of Florida and everything. But even if he does, I think out of competition is definitely only 3 months for first offenses. So
yeah, if they put that for the date of whenever the test happened or the fight, I mean, March would be perfect.
I got to pass this along because you've had him on the show several times. Look to have him on again. Johnny Case gets a fight against another young up-and-coming 155er in Jake Matthews for the fight night coming up in Australia, UFC Fight Night 84. That's headlined by Mark Hunt against Frank Mir. I think that card will that'll end up being a Fight Pass card, but I think that will be the main. That fight should be on the main card portion.
probably
of
Jake
the fight.
Matthews
Those
was
are
last
some
one, I
nice
believe, in Australia.
prospects, and Johnny Case has really looked good. And once again, Johnny Case going out of the country. Last fight in Brazil, now going to Australia. He'll fight anywhere, I guess.
Businessman.
And his first UFC fight was in Japan.
Yeah.
So he's going all over the place.
No,
there.
he was in Mexico City too. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that
he
goes
fought in
well.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Damn,
Hey,
well, there you go.
that's if you want to see the world, this is the way to do it.
He went
He's
from
doing it.
Japan, Boston, Mexico, Brazil,
And he started fighting in Iowa.
And he started fighting in Iowa. Yep. Let's see. Also, Neil Magny gets Hector Lombard coming off his suspension. That's a huge matchup in the welterweight division. Really like that matchup. And speaking of welterweight division, Patrick Cote following his very nice win this weekend in Boston over Ben Saunders, he would like to welcome back Nick Diaz to the octagon. And I know maybe Patrick Cote isn't as high a name as some other guys, but in terms of talent and toughness, and since really besides losing the one fight to Stephen Thompson in the welterweight division, has looked really good since dropping down to 170. And I think you add in the fact that much like Nick Diaz has never been knocked out in a fight either, you have a lot of fireworks potential. And that goes to what I think you and I were saying. Make it Stockton, California. Make it on the Fight Pass for Nick Diaz to return and make people buy Fight Pass to see it. And I think that's the perfect fight. And Patrick Cote's, I think, the perfect guy to do it because he would bring the fight to Nick Diaz. I think it's a great matchup.
I think it has to be either Patrick Cote, because Patrick Cote is on the up and up, or if they really truly want to get Nick Diaz up there for that Lawler rematch, give him Rory Mack. Rory Mack wailed on his brother. Rory's coming off a loss.
That's not a bad one either.
That's a decent fight right there. You can still throw it on Fight Pass. That'll sell well.
I would love to see the Rory fight, but as far as Patrick Cote, this is good on him for A, calling out for the big fight, and B, I mean, it's a good case for him. Nick Diaz has been out for a while. We don't know where he's at. Cote's a top guy. We've seen him go in there and look good recently. I think it's a great matchup. Do I think Nick will like it? And let's be honest, we know how the Diaz brothers are. He's only going to want the number biggest name. So I think if he gets offered anyone above that, like a Roy or any of that top five, he's going to go for that first. But it would be a good matchup if it got made.
Give him Baby J.
Yeah, why a rematch?
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of Baby J, he has announced his return to the sport. He's called out Nick Lentz, and he wants to fight him at UFC 197. It looks as though that fight might not happen, but I think a fight will happen with BJ Penn, and I think more hopeful instead of fighting either on the main card or somewhere on UFC 197. I would prefer a fight night in his home state of Hawaii.
Could you
with
imagine?
that possibly being either the headline or the co-headline fight with a guy like, say, Max Holloway against somebody like, let's say, Ricardo Lamas or Chad Mendez or Jose Aldo, somewhere around those lines to go with that. And then maybe our friend Luis Smoka on the card as well to complete the trifecta there.
That event if
for that.
Like a Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, BJ Penn, some schmuck in 145 or whatever, and then Luis Smoka on there and everything. Oh my goodness! And if Mark Hunt is okay after his fight with Mir, he just flies over to Hawaii. He's still in the Pacific and everything. He's a Pacific guy. Just get all these islanders on one big island and have them fight. I'd take a loan out to go to that.
Honestly, you mentioned Lamas for the matchup, but I'd like Lamas BJ. He's coming back at 45, right? So I think it'd be perfect. I'm pretty excited. I mean, a lot of people know BJ's like my all-time number one, but there's a couple things he's doing here that I like, but I also don't want to get trapped in like I do every time BJ comes back. but he said he was going to Greg Jackson,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which looks good. And I guess he came out to Greg Jackson and said, "Look, I need you to be honest with me. If you see me struggling, tell me I can't do it. Let him know." So I think he's doing the right things. He's not just doing his own little. And I hate to say this, I fell for it again, but I'm excited.
Dude, that's what a lot of folks are thinking.
I-
Like, you know what? We want him to retire, but dang, if I ain't hyped or excited right
it's
now.
BJ Penn. And I know people gave him crap, like, "Oh, look what Edgar did to him in the third fight. That fight was so sad." Well, Edgar also did that to Cub Swanson a week before. Edgar's also dominated all these guys. And
He's
it was
also-
a tough fight for him.
Yeah, Edgar's also slated for a title shot, and he's either going to fight Jose Aldo now for a contendership or fight Conor McGregor. It's like,
Yeah.
cut BJ
And
some
BJ
slack.
Penn had never fought at 145 pounds
Exactly.
before in his
Exactly.
entire career.
So, yeah, people can give him all he wants, but I think BJ Penn still got a little left in him. He's one of the greatest of all time, and I'm going to tune into his fight no matter what.
All right, let's get to Invicta FC 15, which was this past weekend in Costa Mesa, California, highlighted by the main event of Christine Cyborg Justino taking on Daria Igabroma. And much to Daria's credit, she lasted longer than 45 seconds, which was the length of Cyborg's last two
Right.
Invicta fights. She lasted 2 seconds before the end of the round before getting knocked out. So almost one round, pretty close.
It was brutal.
Still got knocked out, though. And it begs the question, does Cyborg have to move down? Because it doesn't seem like Invicta can find anybody at 145 that can come close to challenging her.
Well, she said after her post-fight that she wasn't moving down, wasn't an option anymore, and that she still wants to be the 145 champ, best in the world. However, she's keeping her eye out on the Tate Holly Holm fight. She still wants to fight Rousey, things like that. But Rousey's way down the line. But she's not. It's not on her radar, kind of thing. I think the biggest fight for her is to definitely fight the winner of Holm or Tate, both who said they would move to 145 or even a catchweight to fight Cyborg. The issue with that for Cyborg, though, is for her to do that, would she have to vacate the Invicta title? And if she does that, does she sign over to the UFC permanently or just a one-time fight?
I don't think
Because
she'd have
there's-
to vacate the Invicta belt. The fact that they haven't found anybody to challenge her.
That's the thing, is that's also Invicta's only really big draw. They got really good divisions,
Mhm.
but their biggest draw is Cyborg. And for her, I mean, they're owned by Zuffa. She could do a one-off with Zuffa and then go back to Invicta after the fight regardless. But it puts in a bunch of questions, like, does she move to the UFC? And, she can't stay in the UFC, obviously, because people would have to move to catchweight, or they have to make a women's 145. And then if they make a 145, they may as well just absorb Invicta at that point. So
I don't think the UFC will let her go there for a one-off, just because, say she goes in there and dominates either one, Tate or Holm.
yeah,
I mean, what are you going to do there? I think they would have to add a 45, honestly, because it's going to be a huge fight. I don't see where she goes unless she takes one of those fights, or she can just stay Invicta and beat up anybody.
So do you think we'll probably end up seeing, Invicta getting absorbed soon? I mean, because they got women fighters who
I
have
don't
been
think they're
cut to
gonna do
UFC.
it, because it, to me, is almost like a minor leagues. It's kind of like what I envisioned Strikeforce or WEC being many years ago before they finally just absorbed them, is use it as an outlet where you cut the guys from the UFC, but you still have them around taking on relevant guys,
still
not
fighting
some
for you.
nobody bums in a podunk show
Right.
in Kansas.
Yeah, well, because,
And that's what I think Invicta is. Not saying any of these girls are
right.
are horrible or anything. I'm just saying they're yet to make the big time, and it's in a place and against competition that the UFC can really look at and go, this person I think would be good enough to fight for us. It's a
Right.
perfect minor league system.
Yeah,
and
especially-
I like it around, and I would hate that they would get rid of it, because to me there's really no other place where women can really showcase their talents all in one card, and they won't get overshadowed by the male talent. And I think that this is a good thing
Definitely.
for women's MMA to have Invicta kind of be like a minor league and a stepping stone
Right.
for heading to the UFC.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in that case, she's definitely almost at the root of Demetrius Johnson, where you just run out of contenders real quick. I mean, she just fought someone who kind of just got signed, basically almost over. She only had, I think, either one fight or this is her first fight in Invicta. At this point, you just take what's coming, you take what checks you can get, and just kind of see where you're at. Maybe flirt with doing catchweight fights over in Invicta itself.
Right, they talked about the 135 champion in Invicta, Tanya Evinger,
Yeah.
moving up for a one-off fight.
Definitely, and that would be interesting. It's weird, but at the same time, it's not a loss for Zuffa either way because they still own this. This is still getting them buys and stuff for Fight Pass. That's the thing. It's still shown on UFC Fight Pass. So it's like, for them, all these women still technically work for Zuffa, so they're pretty much as close as to the UFC they're going to get until they probably either get signed over or like Angela Hill's case where she got booted out of the UFC, but she's still fighting under the Zuffa banner and she's doing really well. So
I think the thing with I think Invicta's still its own thing. It's just they're being shown on Fight Pass, though. I don't know if it technically
I don't remember.
owns them.
I'm saying it. I might be wrong. You're right. I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming though, maybe even behind closed doors. Who knows?
That's what I'm saying. We don't know what
on there.
Yeah,
because you're seeing so many women getting passed back and forth between Invicta and
they
UFC
definitely have
so
some
much.
sort of agreement, whether it's paid or not.
On,
yeah, they're definitely friendly with each other, and I don't see that relationship breaking anytime soon. But as far as ownership stock goes, I don't think they have anything in it. But again, if the Invicta, much like the UFC, is a privately held company, so what's actually going behind closed doors, we don't know. But they at least have that partnership to show Invicta fights on the Fight Pass. That is definitely the main part of the deal. So real quick, looking at the other things that happened, Megan Anderson finally gets a win in Invicta, knocking out
really
Amber Liebrock. Nice win for Anderson. She is one of the younger people in the 145 division, so I don't think she gets Cyborg next, but somebody that maybe could build toward. You had Mizuki Inoue gets a big win over Lacey Shuckman, and I think Inoue probably gets a shot at Souza, who had a great victory over Deanna Bennett. We had Deanna Bennett on the show following her last win over Katja Kankampa, and I thought Deanna Bennett had a really big chance in this fight to win, and she was looking really good since dropping down her strawweight, but I give Souza a lot of credit. Maybe she's better than I thought, and Souza may only be 1 or 2 fights away from moving to the UFC's strawweight division if she keeps up performances like this.
Definitely. The Deanna Bennett Souza fight was actually really good. Souza just looked incredible. And the body kick that dropped her basically made Deanna just like yell out almost. I would love to see her come over to 115 and fight. It'd be a good fight, I believe, with Souza.
I would be so. I think Inoue probably gets the next shot, and possibly the winner of that fight moves on, because Inoue was very close, I believe, in her fight against Kowalkiewicz, who just beat Randa Marcos.
Right.
So I think Inoue is not too far. Yeah, she lost to Kowalkiewicz and then Alexa Grasso, another fighter that has tabbed to come over to the UFC very quickly at 115. So, and she also does hold a win over someone who's currently in the UFC in Beck Rollins, and Alex Chambers. Yeah. So she's beaten UFC level talent already, and she's only 21 years old and has 14 fights and has already fought really the who's who of this 115 division already in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and she actually looked really good in her fight the other night. She's really impressive top control. She was going for submission. She was just showing a lot of what we use in the Paige Van Zandt fight, the hustle, kind of that drive when she's on the ground to really try and finish the fight. She was definitely in control, and I loved it. So I'm hoping she makes her way over.
I also want to say kind of what a good card by Invicta. I mean, there was only one decision on the whole card. You got TKO, armbar, guillotine, TKO. I mean, for being like a women's MMA fight, people can say what they want, but these girls are going out there and finishing fights.
Yeah, it was a really good card. And the only one that went to decision actually was probably, I think, in my personal opinion, a cooling of nerves, because right before that fight went on, the ambulance that was ringside actually took an extra 15 minutes to get back. So the women sat in the cage for 15 minutes, kind of just sitting there. And so when they came out, they didn't seem as just like pumped. They seemed a lot more calm and relaxed.
Yeah,
but
kind of reduced their...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So.
Well, makes sense if you figure that was the only decision on the card.
Right.
All right, let's get to the fights that happened for the UFC this weekend in Boston. UFC Fight Night, Dillashaw versus Cruz. Billy and I were among the 12,000 in attendance, and I just want to go over that just real quickly. I was kind of shocked to see only 12,000 people. We were sitting towards the lower part of the upper bowl, and the upper deck was very sparse. Very few seats were available. The lower bowl mostly filled, but again, 12,000 is a little over half capacity for the arena. You add in the fact that they have floor seats, so it's about as much seats as you can get in the TD Garden, which holds over 20,000 people. I thought with this fight, maybe it's because it was a Sunday, even though the Monday was a holiday. I'm not, maybe because it wasn't Conor McGregor in Boston. I'm not really sure. Maybe people spent all their money on the Patriots game the night before.
Right.
I'm not really sure, but I was a little surprised the attendance was that low for what I considered a pretty big fight.
Well, it's crazy because the attendance was low, but their Nielsen rating was 1.7, which was the same amount that McGregor-Seaver did in Boston overnight. And for a
And
Sunday,
it was about
card,
the same weekend, too,
Yeah.
right? The Sunday before
Yes.
Martin Luther King Day.
so a Sunday before a holiday, after a full weekend of like football and basketball and everything, and people still tuned in to watch the event. I mean, they did like 2.88 million, I believe, views overnight for it. That's pretty decent for an evening card on a Sunday.
I think they said it was like the second best on Fox Sports 1 ever, right?
Yeah. I think there's only one right above them, and I think that was the Seaver one.
That was the
Alright,
Conor Seaver.
close.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, this fight, I don't want to say it got overlooked, but to me, this is one of probably the biggest fights or matchups of the year to me personally. So I was shocked too, like you, that arena wasn't packed. But it does make sense with all the big sporting events they had going on over the weekend, stuff like that. But maybe a Sunday. I really don't know what it is, but all I'm thinking now is, what is World Series of Fighting going to do if they can only put 12?
Yeah, if the UFC puts 12 for a huge title fight, yeah, World Series of Fighting go into a similar style arena in Memphis with nobody. Yeah, that's going to be
Absolutely
like
nobody.
4,000 people.
I think if we go there, we could probably get some decent seats.
We
We'll
could
just
get-
move up.
Yeah, no matter what, you're moving up. You could buy the cheapest seat and you're going to the front row.
We had some really good performances on the undercard, including Rob Font knocking out Joey Gomez in the second round. Also, Alir Latifi, just 30 seconds to dispatch Sean O'Connell, I thought was rather impressive. This fight ended in a unanimous decision for Charles Rosa, but Kyle Bochniak, I think that's how they were pronouncing his name, in the featherweight division, first ever UFC fight. I believe he took this on short notice, and taking on a tough guy like Charles Rosa, I thought he performed great. And I think he is a kid to look out for, and I would like to see him with a full camp around him, because I thought he was step for step with a guy like Charles Rosa, and a guy that came into this fight undefeated, all 6 of his fights being first-round finishes. I thought he did the 15 minutes relatively well, and he's, again, a guy I would like to see in the future. I think he's definitely a bright prospect that the UFC picked for this event on short notice.
Yeah, very much for him. I mean, he comes in there and makes a statement, even though he takes a loss, but it's a big one. But the biggest guy for me that surprised me was Latifi, man. He came in there sharp and just got it done quick. Sean O'Connell kind of had, I don't want to say hype around him because of his fighting. It was more because of his weigh-in antics, but you see this guy everywhere. I mean, he didn't care. He came in there, he made a statement. So Latifi really shocked me there.
Yeah, Sean O'Connell is interesting. He's fun to watch. I mean, he likes to bounce back and forth between U.S. fights in Australia because he's from Australia, so he fights there a lot. I was on the Sean O'Connell hype train. I still am, because with his fight, you never know if he's going to come out, because he gets some good KOs, or if he's going to come out and have like an all right fight or get knocked out. But I also love Alir Latifi. I'm really hoping this dude starts making waves at light heavyweight and starts getting up there. I've been rooting for this guy for a while as well, and it was nice to see him come out just with a really impressive finish. So, and Charles Rosa and Kyle Bochniak, man, that was a definitely, I think, a sleeper on some people. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, oh man, this fight's gonna be insane until it happened, and that's good for the featherweight division, where a lot of it's kind of still in the aftermath of this whole McGregor tear kind of thing. And it's kind of nice now because it'll allow it to build itself back up with new contenders now that a lot of the old ones are kind of passing the guard back and forth. So
our good friend Darren Cruikshank had a overall good performance, but just couldn't hold on there at the end, as Paul Felder was able to take his back late in the third round to get the rear naked choke. Great fight by both gentlemen. Just Paul Felder was able to get himself into a good position to get the win. And Darren, this is now his third loss in a row, third by submission. I hope he doesn't get cut. There's a lot of reason to have him cut, but I hope, because this fight was exciting and he's been exciting in his career, the UFC maybe gives him one more chance. But this is a nice win for Paul Felder, who, much like Cruikshank, had fallen on hard times, had back-to-back losses there to Edson Barboza and Ross Pearson, I believe, before that as well. Another name might be escaping me that he lost to. So he finally got the win, not from Boston, but the nickname of the Irish Dragon. You know, the fans were really rooting for in that one, and I think Paul Felder gets another good fight here in the lightweight division.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see him take on Michael Johnson.
That's not bad.
Yeah, because Michael Johnson,
matchup.
Unfortunately for Johnson, he just got taken on live 15. A win on Felder could keep him solidified in that top 10. Felder shows that he can really hang with those good guys.
I'd like to see Paul. Maybe this is jumping him too soon, but I think it's the perfect name because it's not someone too high. Again, this is all granted he wins in 2 weeks, but Paul Felder against Sage Northcutt, I think
that'd be a fun
because
fight.
it's somebody that's a bigger name, but not someone that's like in the top 15, and it's not too quick for somebody like Sage. And the fact that they only fought 2 weeks in advance, if Sage gets another quick finish, that could be a fight potentially in the future.
Or they could just feed Darren Cruikshank to Sage Northcutt and see how that goes and everything.
No, I think Felder, that'd be the perfect matchup because, like you said, Sage he's been fighting guys, but they're sort of guys that are right with him where it's also their first couple UFC fights, you know. Felder's a guy that's established. He's not quite that top 15, but he is. I mean, let's be honest. This was a tough matchup for Cruikshank because Felder took 2 losses, but he took 2 losses to way higher competition. I mean, the guy went toe-to-toe with Edson. And I mean, Cruikshank showed really good stuff in this, but it just, you can't get by in the UFC if you're one-dimensional. He showed he can strike better than probably almost any, like with the best in this division, no matter what. He was putting it on Felder, landing some nasty shots. But at the end of the day, if you don't got that grappling, so for Cruikshank, I just don't know where you go from here. And I think you definitely have to switch it up. I know he's like his Michigan top team guys. Maybe bring someone in for jiu-jitsu or something.
I think for his fight, I think we mentioned this. It's okay for his fight camp, but right now the in-between fights announced, you know, it was kind of a joking thing. Like Neil Magny took a Damian Maia seminar. Maybe go to something like a Damian Maia seminar, or just go train jiu-jitsu a couple months out of camp, and then when you get your fight book, go back to top team and apply that stuff that you learn. I mean, Detroit Jiu-Jitsu is there. It's kind of in combination, and maybe do something like that for Darren, because obviously that's his one glaring weakness. It's obvious. He has good wrestling. His wrestling's good, but a couple times he's put his head in situations, especially it's looked apparent in these last 3 fights because he's got submitted all those times, that maybe he was unaware he was doing. And I think it's an easy thing to correct for him. And I think he just go out for a couple months. You know, he went out a couple months after his first UFC fight and trained with Uriah Faber and the guys at Alpha Male. So something like that, out of camp thing to go and train and learn some different techniques to bring back, you know, home here to Detroit.
Yeah, well, and this is all me, Darren Cruikshank. This is my opinions on his situation. You know, the first thing is I don't think he's going to get cut, which is good for him. I mean, if they could keep guys like Leonard Garcia and Diego Sanchez around for as long as they went on
Dan
skids,
Hardy.
Yeah, you know, and as long as they also, like, Garcia didn't start getting, he didn't get cut until he had like a string of really controversial split decisions, you know. So I think Darren, he's so exciting. Since they're trying to stack these Fox Sports 1s and Fight Pass cards, he's going to be around for those. And I mean, he's a recognizable name that's exciting that people still want to watch. You know, what casual fans saw was a really exciting dude just get caught by a rear naked choke. That's it. They saw this guy kicking him in the face, throwing from weird angles, and that excites people. Most casual fans probably don't realize this is his 3rd rear naked choke loss, which goes to my next point is like, maybe he should see a fight therapist about that, because Chael Sonnen had the same issue with triangles. And he talked about that. It was like, you know, when he was talking to Uriah Hall, he's like, you know, there's always a fight. I'd be winning. I'd go in and I would just get too confident or something would happen mentally and I would get caught in a triangle. Maybe something's going on with Darren where someone just gets to his back or gets on top of him and he snaps for a second, like out of it. And he just gives up his neck, or he doesn't really think about what's going on. And he just ends up getting caught. You know, maybe there's just like a block right there. Maybe something, you know, with his training. You know, but for 3 rear naked chokes in a row on fights, he was doing decent in too. His striking looked good, you know. So some fights better than others, but the thing is, his striking was there. It looked like he was in the fight. So for 3 of them in a row, it feels more like there's just something like at a point in the transition when he's on the ground or something. Maybe he's just got to get past this block, you know, and just maybe drill something a little bit better. even if it's mentally, or maybe he just needs to really, really focus on this mat work. So
now I saw that we've had him on the show as well. His good friend and training partner, Jason Fisher, is flying out to do some training with AKA. That's another gym I would say would benefit Darren as well. So maybe he'll join Jason out there. Also, Chris Wade, overall, and you look at it, he got the result he wanted, a first-round finish win over Mehdi Baghdad, but rather lackluster for about the 4 minutes of that 4 minutes and 30 seconds, kind of laying there, not landing a lot of damage. Then there was a quick scramble, and that's when Wade was able to take the back. So, yes, Wade got the finish, but, you know, he didn't do much up until that point.
Yeah, well, he did what he was supposed to do. If he
Yeah.
took a win on a last minute.
Luke Saunders, got to give a big shout out to him. He gets the performance, one of the performance of the night bonuses. This guy took this fight short notice, up a weight class, first ever UFC fight, takes out, I think, a pretty tough guy in Maximum Blanco, submits him in the first round. Great post-fight speech, too, if you haven't seen it. This guy coming out of Nashville saying, man, I didn't think I'd make it here. You know, I've been scrounging, I've been scrapping, I'm broke. He goes, I need some money. Maybe a performance of the night bonus that helped me out. You know, he goes, I'm just trying to do whatever I can, you know, just to pay my bills, man, and, you know, just try to do what I love. And the whole crowd got up and kind of appreciated that in a town like Boston, more of a blue-collar town. And I think Luke Saunders, good debut at featherweight. Man, I'd like to see what this guy brings to the table down a weight class then, if he can take out a guy like Blanco on short notice up a weight class. I think he's going to start getting some money to help him pay those bills pretty soon, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to get off the topic and get back to Crookshank, but this card was perfect for him. 3 rear naked chokes in a row. Right?
Way to kick off the night. No, yeah, Luke Saunders, he's going the route of another featherweight. No, I'm not going to go into that spiel. But yeah, I was actually really impressed by it. Maximo Blanco, I think I actually picked to win this fight.
Most people probably did.
Yeah, most. I mean, as a gambler, that's the smarter bet. However, he impressed. He did really well. I think, you know, throw him down there with Charles Rosa next or anything like that would be a fun fight. To start giving this dude fights, he's earning them. He's exciting. So
yeah, man, he came out there and he really went for it, and he got the job done, and he got a finish, man. He deserves it, and I think we're going to see a lot come from this kid. And I want to get on to Mehdi Baghdad a little bit, man. He kind of disappointed me. He kind of offered nothing. I know he said, but Wade didn't do too much offensively until that, but he kind of just handled it, never was in any trouble.
Yeah, and then we had back-to-back second-round knockouts by some longtime veterans of the sport in Ed Herman and Patrick Cote. Nice fight, I thought, by both guys, Herman and Bosch, both for landing shots. Herman was able to get the clinch. Both guys actually in the clinch, if you kind of look at it, was able to use their Muay Thai striking. Herman was able to land the Muay Thai knee, and it just floored Tim Bosch. So very nice win for Ed Herman. Maybe Ed Herman Latifi coming up. I think that's a solid matchup. And then for Cote, he got Saunders in the clinch, but used the old uppercut, the old dirty box in there, and probably hit Saunders, I think 4 or 5 of them before Saunders finally went down and Patrick Cote finished this one. And I think this is now his 3rd win in a row and 5 of his last 6 since moving to 170 for the Predator, Patrick Cote. I'm double checking my numbers here. Yep, 3 in a row. And actually, he has won 6 out of his last 7 if you go back to him fighting at 185 as well. So not too shabby. The one loss coming, like I said, to Stephen Thompson in September of 2014. So, like I said, I don't think it's too out of the realm of possibility that this guy could take on Nick Diaz. The only thing is, it's January. He'd have to wait till August. There's a good chance Cote fights somewhere sooner than that. And if he gets another big win like he did, you almost can't deny him getting somebody around the level of a Nick Diaz.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I think that'd be better for him. I think going from guys like, no offense to Ben Saunders, I think Ben Saunders is great. I picked him to win this fight. To Nick Diaz is a little crazy. But if he gets one big fight in the middle there, the end of that top 10, I think it's the perfect matchup for him. And he has the perfect amount of time to do it. So I'd really like to see that, man. Cote, ever since was that coming off that Ultimate Fighter, he's been putting it together. I mean, Stephen Thompson's tough. That's his one loss in the last 5 fights.
Yeah, it's his only loss in the last, well, it could be going on 4 years.
Yeah, so
I mean, and look,
And like he was
Sorry.
saying, it now gave him a winning record in the UFC.
right? And then like you look who he's lost against. So like also like Stephen Thompson's now fighting Johnny Hendricks. He lost against what? Kung Lee was his last fight before that he lost. Like
that was
it
when
was,
Kung Lee was good.
and
too.
that was like a good Kung Lee. And then what? Tom Lawler, who was decent at the time, Alan Belcher, and Anderson Silva. If you want to keep going digging back and back on this guy, Cote has been like a consistent dude. It's just like lately he's been kind of putting it up there. He's kind of almost like Robbie Lawler, where something happened in training camp and they just found that niche. And it's like
Right.
boom, boom,
And he's
boom,
a guy
going up.
we mentioned that had losses and still came back in the UFC.
Mhm.
His first 4 UFC fights were all losses. He didn't get, after he debuted in the UFC in 2004, he didn't get his first UFC win until 2007, believe it or not. So this is a guy that perseverance. I mean,
Yeah.
he was able to then win 5 in a row to get a shot at Anderson Silva. We all know he got hurt in that fight. Came back, got 3 more losses, rededicated himself to the sport, and like now he's won 6 of his last 7.
I mean, was his first fight in the UFC Tito Ortiz?
Yeah,
Well, it's weird.
his first fight in the UFC ever was the
So-
main event of UFC 50 against Tito Ortiz. It's crazy to think this guy's now fighting at 170 and doing successful, and he fought
Look
Tito
at that
Ortiz
killer that he
in
put
his
him on.
prime.
They
In
put
his prime.
Tito Ortiz, Joe Dirksen, Chris Lieben, and is that a title fight?
That was the
At
Ultimate Fighter finale
Okay.
winner. The winner
Okay,
got a
the
shot
champion. Okay,
at
that-
Anderson. That's when
Yeah,
Luter
that's
got
the
his
Travis
shot
Luter,
that he
yeah.
missed weight on.
Yeah, that's crazy. Against Travis Luter. So those are all insane fights. And then he went out, still UFC, fought some Scott Smith at the time, Kendall Grove, Ricardo Almeida. At the
Drew
UFC,
McFedries at the time was a decent name.
That's the thing. He was fighting all these insane names in UFC. And honestly, you can make an argument that he hasn't fought almost anything less. And even recently, the names he's still fighting, they're still decent names. I don't really can see anyone you could call like a can at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been fighting at least mid-tier, top tier UFC talent. It's UFC. These are really decent dudes. So I'm excited. I think, with all this back and forth with Lawler and, Royer Mack or Johnny Hendricks and everything, I think Cote is definitely going to start coming up along with Damian Maia, which I think would be a weird and interesting fight, though. They're both used to be middleweights.
You and I talked before the show. Rick Story. If Rick Story can come back against Patrick Cote, I think would be a heck of a fight. And if they weren't coming off of losses, I would say Gunnar Nelson would be and Brandon Thatch would be good matchups. But with both those guys coming off of losses, and I think Thatch does have a fight booked. But maybe if Thatch can win in February in Pittsburgh, that makes it more of an attractive matchup. But I think Rick Story.
Matt
would
Brown's
be
out there
tremendous.
being a shark right now, lurking in
That's
the waters
true.
and everything. Welterweight is good. I give it a year's time. Welterweight's going to be
Maybe he
incredibly
fights the
interesting.
Cerrone Means winner even.
Yeah, that's right. Cerrone's even up there in welterweight now. That's kind of crazy.
All right, let's get to the main card, UFC Boston. First fight of the evening, Francisco Trinaldo against Ross Pearson. Not an amazing, spectacular fight, but an okay fight, and I definitely think Trinaldo did enough to win in this fight. And looking at the stats, he was more active than Pearson, throwing 114 to just 89, and also landed more, 53 to 32 for the man from Brazil. And really, the first round was really close. Trinaldo did have that takedown. I think I would have gave Pearson round 1. But after that, Trinaldo, I think, was all over him. I think he started to up the volume. I think he got comfortable, and I think he figured out what Ross Pearson was doing. And I think by the time the third round rolled around, I don't think Pearson had much left to offer Francisco Trinaldo. And the main thing I think about Pearson, just not enough output for me. 89 strikes in 15 minutes is not going to cut it, I think, against a guy like Trinaldo. And
Right.
I think it proved he needed more output. And also, he was throwing a little more kicks than you usually see him do, but I would have liked to seen a little more diversity in the striking as well. I think that's what you got to do to mess with Trinaldo. And I thought Trinaldo, higher in output, still not high enough. I'm still ready to say this guy is ready to make a title run, but he did show the diversity in striking that I think helped him win this fight. And I think that's what maybe confused Ross Pearson a little bit.
Definitely. I think the big thing in this fight, and I picked Pearson for this one, but I was torn. I mean, we were all three of us were actually kind of like on the fence of where this was going to go because it was a weird fight to pick, honestly, stylistically. And it just went to show that that's kind of how it played out. I mean, because it was still pretty even, with how the rounds played out. You could see back and forth, takedowns, striking. But you saw Trinaldo do what we kind of ended up agreeing on, is that if Trinaldo can come out and set the pace and just run with it, then he was probably going to beat Ross Pearson, at least by decision. He kind of dictated what he was going to do with his kicks and everything, and just showed that, he's no slouch to want to like take down or defend against takedowns. I think it kind of frustrated Pearson for a bit, and it just came out to output, but at the same point, like you said, not like some type of output. It was like, whoa, this guy's a machine. It's just he just fought a smart fight. I'm going to go off what you said earlier. I think that Trinaldo fight would be a perfect test for Sage Northcutt if he gets a decent win in his next fight. Mm-hmm. I think that would be an excellent shot for him, because I'm starting to like Sage Northcutt, and I would love to see him tested against a dude who has just like this grind aspect about him and everything. So
yeah, I like that. That's a perfect for a little guy that's been on a run like him, but it's a bigger name. But the thing is, yeah, Trinaldo got this win. He got by. I think he could still do a lot more. It's just there's something about Pearson that I don't know what it is. He has that potential. I think maybe he headhunts a little too much. He sits on them big shots or something because there's not a lot of output. We've seen him get big knockouts in the past, but every time I sort of get hyped, like, oh, Ross Pearson's kind of about to make a run. Like after, was it the big Gray Maynard knockout? And I think there was one more win in there.
The Sam Stout knockout.
Yeah, he kind of has a lackluster fight in between, but I think this is his back-to-back loss now.
He took a split loss to Diego.
Yeah, so tough loss. Who doesn't get decision by Diego? But for Trinaldo, it's definitely a good win. He gets by. He edges Pearson out just a bit, a little more output, a little more active, and they'll get the job done.
All right, let's get to the next fight. Also a very interesting fight as Travis Brown took on Matt Mitrione. In the first round, there was a inverted eye poke by Brown to the face of Mitrione. Mitrione appeared okay after kind of blinking it out for a few minutes. Came back round two. Very similar thing happened again. And this is after inactivity by both gentlemen. Both seem unwilling to engage, as noted by 17 landed strikes combined in round one and only 28 landed combined in round two. And after the fight, Mitrione is going to say it was the referee's job to stop me from myself from continuing after the second eye poke, after saying that he wasn't seeing very well. And while yes and no, if you're saying you want to fight,
yeah, I've had choice,
and you have a referee that's inexperienced like they had, which was Gary Foreman, which I was kind of commenting to you, he might have been a guy that's actually like a promoter on the local MMA circuit in Massachusetts, and they used him because they know his name to reach out. That's probably how they got a couple of the guys like Bochniak, who we got to get on short notice sort of thing. And I think he's not a real referee. That's my guess, because there's probably not many referees on tap for the Massachusetts Athletic Commission for them to tab.
Yeah,
so that's my guess. I could be 100% wrong on this, but that's my guess, because I think if Herb Dean was in that situation, I think he stops the fight. But Gary Foreman, being maybe a little inexperienced, goes, hey, you say you can fight, you can fight. So you can't put all the onus here on Gary Foreman. Yeah, no. I don't think you can, because of it. It's one of those things. Same thing when a coach wants to take the pitcher out of the game. I got one more in me, coach.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing. You're always going to say you want to face one more batter. You want to do one more round as a fighter. You never want to really give it up. So as much as I say that, Matt Mitrione said he wanted to fight at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, well, here's the thing.
In hindsight, well, for him, I guess just 20, because he doesn't have the second 20 in the eye. So, again, he still said it. That's what happens in the sport sometimes. Yeah, he put himself out there, and Travis Brown took advantage of the situation against the guy that was hurt, gets the finish. Wasn't his greatest win, but it is a win.
Yeah, no, I see no fault for the ref at this at all. I mean, he even did say, hey, watch the fingers before the second eye poke and everything. There's only so much you can do as a ref. You can't run up and just grab the guy's hand while he's sitting there distancing and putting his hand up the jab. If they're on the fence, you can smack their fingers off the fence, but you can't come in between the two dudes when they're pacing and stepping at each other and trying to feel each other out. So it's kind of tough for him because he's kind of inexperienced, but I see no fault at him. I put all the fault now on Matt Mitrione. At first, I thought Travis Brown was a scumbag. I was mad at him. I'm really disliking Travis Brown from how I used to love him.
Still think he is.
Oh, and I still believe he is. However, for Mitrione to now start shifting blame all over the place and then just throwing it on the dude who was just an amateur ref at best, we could say, it's just like, you had the moment to have the stop fight. The doctor almost stopped the fight. He was concerned, looking at his eyes, and then went back, put a flashlight in his eyes, brought another doctor in.
Yep.
Look at his eyes.
We were like,
and he
what?
kept saying, because Mitrione started the fight saying, I'm seeing double. Hang on, I'm seeing double. Said it to the ref. The ref did his job, pulled the doctor in. And then when they go to stop it, Mitrione's like, no, I don't want to stop the fight. What did you want? You wanted an extra break? You're no better than Yoel Romero then if you wanted to sit against the fence and wait for your eye to adjust. At that point, Travis Brown beat you to a doctor stoppage.
And also, you had 2 doctors come in and also say that you were good to go. So how can you put it solely on the referee?
Right.
You can't put it solely on the referee. Like you said, you sent in a second doctor? I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, and so it's like he got cut. If he got cut on the eye, the doctors would have stopped it. They said he was fine. He kept saying he saw double, so they got concerned. They're like, if you're seeing double, we'll stop it. We will. And they had the vice president of affairs, or whoever the guy is on the commentary, was Rogan and Goldberg talking about how they would take points. Mark Ratner, there we go. Talk about where they would go from there and everything, how it would be a no contest, things like that. He should have took the no contest if he really was seeing double or he had a bad eye. You know what his complaint was? He went back in there, thought he was going to win. Look at that third round. Look at the pace then Matt took against Travis Brown. Look at that. 5 of 6 strikes landed to a 39 of 65 and a takedown against him. All right. He got popped in the eye, and now he's like, you know what? I was seeing double. I wanted to go out and fight and everything, put a show on for Dana. Maybe I shouldn't have done that because now I got a busted orbital. I got a shattered shoulder, and look what it paid against.
Yeah, they both lose in this fight. I'm going to be honest. I mean, even the win on Travis Brown now, even if he came out there and just in that third round got that finish without the eye pokes, it would have been like, all right, you got Mitrione. But then with the eye pokes and all that controversy, because there's no doubt Mitrione was fighting different after that second one. He was kind of lunging in with them shots, and it was a whole different fight. But I don't see much from either of these guys. And as far as Mitrione, I mean, when you get cleared by 2 doctors, I don't see how people are blaming the ref so much. If you get cleared by 2 doctors and it's up to you and you say, yeah, I'm good, I want to fight. We've seen fighters, I think it was Darren Cruikshank, that you play it smarter and you say, no, my eye's not good.
Yeah,
I don't want to take any more
Think of your career.
Damage.
You're a heavyweight. Think of your career.
There's nowhere you can put the blame but on yourself. It'd be one thing if it was bad enough to where the doctor said, all right, we're not doing this. But if 2 come in, I think it's up to your discretion at that point. It's not the ref's call.
Yeah, and I mean, and then another night, though, I want to say quick, this doesn't move Brown anywhere, in my opinion, in ranking-wise. Because all he did was beat Mitrione. To be honest, Brown was on the down, which is why Mitrione got the fight. I don't feel like this moves him up anywhere based on recent performances and stuff.
No, I think Travis Brown will probably get the loser of Rothwell Barnett, and the winner of that fight faces Overeem for the next #1 contender.
Probably.
That to me would be the big thing in the grand scheme.
Yeah, I don't think
grand scheme of the heavyweight division.
I don't think Brown showed any promise. He showed nothing that excited me. I think he sort of hit his little best Terry he's going to hit. Also, though, another discussion I want to bring up off topic, which is coming big online, is there a problem with the UFC glove? You see a lot of people showing the Pride glove and how it makes their hand curve like this. The UFC
Bellator glove has they call it the Power Lock from Everlast, has more of a curve to it as well. And also I have a replica Pride glove. I don't have an official one. Those ones are hard to find and very expensive. Those of you who know who collect memorabilia. But the fingers themselves also went longer on the Pride glove too. They extended further out, whereas the UFC one stopped kind of right around the knuckle. Yeah. So that is also a thing that the Pride gloves had as well.
Right.
Pride ended in 2007.
But then, and people were bringing this up, and I've been following this kind of glove thing for a while. The issue comes that the reason the UFC gloves are the way they are is for submissions. It's easier to grapple when your fingers are more free. And someone put out a statistic that showed that there are significantly more, not even just historical and revolutionary subs, but just more subs overall, UFC-wise, than we even saw Pride-wise, kind of thing. And it's just, they say the shape of the glove and it's how it restricts your fingers. It's just, it would almost discourage a lot of grappling because it's almost harder to move your hand.
I can see that.
And which is a tough situation. It's just like, do you want to worry about fighter safety and almost admonish a very big aspect
I guess
of
the
sport,
thing would be finding a balance,
which is
somewhere
why
in the
they
middle.
haven't found one. It's just like because they haven't such a tough balance,
Another reason too, this is off topic again, that I want to give this ref credit. how many people are going after him like you take a point or no contest? How many fights with big refs have you seen in there with John Jones and nothing
John
happens?
McCarthy was the only one I think who actually enforced one recently.
Here's the thing.
In that
In this fight,
Jacare
even if he
fight,
would have
that's fence
taken a
grabbing.
point away, Travis Brown knocks him out in the third round. He still wins the fight regardless of losing a point.
Right.
I'm just saying,
So in this instance, I don't think it was going to make much of a difference. I had a feeling.
But someone
sooner or
taking
later
action is
someone
what we
would get
wanted.
there.
And so
Yeah.
for a local
All right.
circuit ref to even threaten it, though, was nice. Because there's the thing. It's like this guy, probably from somewhere in Massachusetts, local guy, whatever. He apparently is enforcing the rules better than all these other guys. It's just like there's so many dudes who do the dirty, hand behind the head, fingers out. Oh, I'm just gauging my reach. You could do that with a punch. If Silva can do that with a punch and a kick and not put fingers out, you should be able to also. So it's like, it's dirty. A lot of folks are saying first point, the first offense, just a point right away. Second offense, just a DQ, which is super severe. But at the same point, there are fouls that you would get like at a point immediately for severity. I mean, and when you see guys like Darren Cruikshank and Michael Bisping and such who have taken severe eye damage.
Anthony Johnson.
I mean, you've seen some dudes take some severe damage to their eye, or it's just like, maybe you have to.
I don't want to say because I guess it hold up the fights, no like instant replay thing, but there's definitely got to be a way. They show it in 30 seconds. They show it in like 2 seconds after they have the replay up. How can you not?
Yeah,
take a look
instant
and be like,
replay
was this
still has to
intentional?
be something that gets incorporated for not just fouls for other.
If we
fight
could use it in
ending
college
things, too,
basketball, I think we should be able to use
Yeah.
it at the highest level of MMA. I'm just saying.
All right, let's get to the co-main event of the evening. Former UFC champion Anthony Pettis took on former Bellator champion Eddie Alvarez. Very close fight. Looking at the numbers, Anthony Pettis did outstrike Alvarez 109-74. Alvarez was successful on 6 of his 15 takedown attempts. I thought the first round was definitely Eddie Alvarez's. He landed 3 of 5 in that first round in the takedown department. Pettis, again, outstruck him 35-18. Round 2, I thought, was Anthony Pettis's. He shook off all 4 takedown attempts by Eddie Alvarez in the round and outstruck him 32-18. And heading into that third round, it was really, I think, up for grabs. Pettis did his best to try to strike him, just edged him out in strikes 42-38, but got taken down another 3 times in that round. And the takedown and the threat of the takedown is what was able to give Eddie Alvarez the split decision victory in Boston. And while it was a win, it wasn't the most exciting. I don't even think it was the most impressive win we've seen from Eddie Alvarez thus far in his career. He was talking about a title shot, but this is not a performance to me that warrants a shot at the 155 title, and instead maybe a matchup with somebody like a Tony Ferguson. And for Anthony Pettis, man, he got tied up. He wasn't able to do striking, but that's what people are going to do to him. And in a 3-round fight, he didn't have that opportunity to be able to lose a couple rounds and come back and have a knockout in the 4th or 5th. So to this, the 3 rounds really benefited Eddie Alvarez because he knew, I just got to win 15 minutes. I'm going to win 25. And for Eddie, he's lucky this wasn't the main event because I don't think he would have been able to do this for 25 minutes. And unfortunately for Pettis, in that short amount of time, you can't really give up rounds. You don't have as much time to come back. And Eddie Alvarez got the win, and Pettis once again is going to have to just work harder to get out of these positions. That's really all it is. Stopping overall, that would be 9 takedowns out of 15 attempts is really good when you really look at it. I don't think it's necessarily his takedown defense is that bad. It's just he was tied up for too long in those exchanges to let his striking go, I think, is what more of the issue is.
Yeah. Obviously now for Pettis, when there's a champ on the spotlight and you go through all their tape and everything, everyone kind of works out the way to solve the problem to beat the champ. And what RDA and Guida did was just show that forward pressure and just taking the guy down and just holding him against the fence, holding him against the down is where you beat him. Guida was the first to beat him in the UFC, to welcome him in. And Guida derailed that incredible hype train. Then RDA came in, mixed up with a little bit of boxing, and then pushed him up against the fence and took him down. Eddie Alvarez, of course, is going to do the same thing. And for Alvarez, this was like he needed this win to really make sure that, hey, you know what? The UFC fought really hard to get me in here. I got it over here. I'm not going to just take this abuse of getting killer after killer after killer. I want to go prove a point that, I can fight smart and I can win it how I need to, anywhere I want. And he went out there and he did exactly what he needed. Anthony Pettis hates being pushed up against the fence, grinded on, and just held. And while striking exchange-wise, Pettis was lighting him up and taking it. The thing is when, a majority of the fight, even just the minutes of the round, is when you're being pushed against the fence and the guy's grinding on your hips and either clinching you up and holding you, a la Johnny Hendricks, or smacking your back to the ground. You're losing points there. It's not going to look good for you, the refs. And that's what the fight Pettis was for, is Alvarez was fighting Pettis. Pettis had to fight the judges, and it's tough because that's where it goes. I want Alvarez-Ferguson. Ferguson wanted the winner of this. I think that's a good fight because for Alvarez, if he beats Ferg, that'd be a win on Gilbert Melendez, a win on Pettis, and then a win on Ferguson. You could totally argue a title shot there because he's the old title holder from the other division. Pettis, give him Nate Diaz.
Yeah, I agree with everything, but I don't know what more Anthony Pettis can do in this situation because it's been exposed the keys to beating Anthony Pettis. He goes out of his way, and he gets Izzy, who's like one of the top wrestling guys. And I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. There's nothing he can do. He can't catch up on that level.
He already trains with Ben Askren there at Rufus Sport for how many years Askren's been there?
Yeah, so it's like the key. I mean, he can just keep trans wrestling. Maybe eventually it gets there. But
do you think he would ever drop down? Is that maybe the answer? Just these guys are too big for him?
He looks. I don't know if he's going to be able to.
I don't think he's a small lightweight by any means, but maybe it's something he can consider because if he's going to keep on keep on getting pushed around by guys, then you got to do something to change. So you either got to change your training or you got to change your weight class, right? I mean, what else? Those are the two options for him right now.
Anthony Pettis, I've been a UFC champion. I got the sickest striking in the game. I go pure kickboxing.
Hey, honestly, that would not be a bad thing. Being said, weight cut wise, if dudes like Gray Maynard, Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, BJ Penn, Olivier, all different body builds can get down to that weight class. I mean, even Frank Yeager could possibly go to 135. Granted, he's incredibly small. He was a stocky guy at lightweight. Anthony Pettis could probably make it there. I mean, because look at him. He's 5'10". He's got an inch on McGregor. McGregor's got a nice, strong build. I think Pettis could make that weight. It'd be tough, and he would look like crap during the weigh-ins.
His birthday's coming up. He's going to become, I believe, 29 years old.
Oh,
so
there we go, man.
I think he's at a crossroads.
Definitely. I think this is a definite eye opener for him. And
if he doesn't, and I feel like if he doesn't do the weight, if he doesn't drop this year, he may have missed his window. Because I think once you start. No offense. I think once you start getting into your 30s, already having as many high-profile fights and wars as he have, I don't think it's as smart. So I think his career is definitely at a crossroads.
Yeah, it's right now. He does it now, or he finds a path. Because right now, we know what people are going to do to Pettis. Pettis knows what people are going to do to him, and he's training for that. But he's still having the problems with it. So it's just where does he go from here? And for Alvarez, kind of want to get into that. You get Ferguson, and that's the next matchup. You have to make that. And then, like you said, if Pettis wants to stay there, Diaz is the best fight for him. Pettis kind of said he wants people to outstand and fight with him. That's all Diaz wants. Perfect matchup for both guys.
Throw it on that Fight Pass card with Nick and everyone else, or whatever you want to do. I think Anthony Pettis, if he doesn't move down, he's going to be stuck at the top 15er in lightweight, where he'll probably just do exciting fights to sell cards.
Yeah, because there's just I don't see any way Alvarez jumps anyone in line or gets a title shot right now.
Let's get to the main event of the evening for the Bantamweight Championship of the World as TJ Dillashaw took on Dominic Cruz. Looking at this matchup, Dillashaw had a slight edge actually in landed strikes, but a narrow one, 130 to 122. However, his landing percentage was a lot lower as he was 130 of 430 and Cruz was 122 of 312. So really neither landed against each other that much if you really look at it. Especially Dillashaw had the output that you would like to see in the output he has been putting on his other fights. It's just simply he wasn't able to land as much. And for Cruz, a little less output, but still not even a great percentage, even by his standards. However, he was able to mix in 4 takedowns of 11 attempts, just 1 for Dillashaw. And looking over the striking numbers, every round is very close. In fact, the widest margin of landed strikes is in the very first round as Dillashaw outstruck Cruz 26-21. That's the biggest margin. So to me, this was a very close fight. And do I think it was deserving of a split decision? Maybe not. I think Cruz won 3 of these 5 rounds. I think there's more of a case for that than Dillashaw winning 3 of the 5. And I think, to me, rounds 2 and 3 I thought were Cruz. The other 3 you kind of had some room to play around with, but I think Cruz won 2, 3, and 5, and I would have gave Dillashaw 1 and 4. So on my scorecards, I had the 48-47, and I think Billy, you might have had it 4-1. I think so. You had it. That would have been 49-46, and Colin, of course, you were watching TV. So what was your kind of thinking, looking at now you see the numbers and breaking down the scoring of the rounds here?
Well, it's definitely looking at it. What was actually counter-wise? It's really interesting to see how close the numbers were, because when you're watching the fight on TV, just watching the amount of strikes that missed were crazy. I had it scored either 3-2 for Cruz or 4-1 for Cruz. I feel like the big one for sure was round 4 was Dillashaw. Round 5 was one where early out I gave it to Dillashaw because he rocked him and he started getting that leg that he got in the 4th round. I felt like he was starting to get the momentum. But towards the end, Cruz started to get back into that, okay, I'm just going to show you what this is about kind of thing. And so that's where I saw, like, okay, there's probably going to be a big discrepancy on round 5. In that round, I could see could have went either way, which is, I imagine, where Billy gave it, is that he could have gave round 5 to Cruz, which I see no argument against. But yeah, 3-2 for Dominic. It's a perfect case of just to beat the champ, you got to beat the champ, and Cruz is perfect at just beat people like that.
I could almost give Cruz like every round, because I think a lot of people, when you see these stats on paper, they say, yeah, Dillashaw is close in the striking, but I look at the real significant shots. I mean,
right,
a lot of TJ's shots were hitting glove, barely glazing. I mean, even if he touched him, he didn't really touch him. He landed like 2 decent head kicks I think landed kind of clean. But besides that, the main difference in this fight that won Cruz even more was the wrestling. That was the difference. I mean, when he mixes in his takedowns, puts Dillashaw on his backs, I think he definitely landed the solider punches. All his strikes were, I think, a lot more significant for the majority of them. I think Cruz, he just handled this fight perfectly. He mixed in his wrestling. He made TJ miss, and he landed the better shots.
Do you think this is a case of maybe TJ being a guy that normally throws a lot of volume, but maybe against a guy like Cruz should have actually thrown less, as weird as that sounds? Kind of toning it down just a tad? Because
making him pay for it every
most
time.
guys, if you throw 430 strikes the way Dillashaw has been fighting, he's probably going to win. I'm a firm believer volume usually helps you win fights, but Dominic Cruz is maybe the one guy in any division, maybe next to Anderson Silva, and I think Machida also was this way during his prime too, that's maybe counterintuitive. There are very few guys, and I think Cruz is one of those guys. And so I think in this case, maybe changing up his strategy a little bit, because the missing so much, I think, hurts him. When you throw 430 strikes and you land less than half would have been 215. So I don't know the exact percentage, but that's like 33%, I think he landed, or something like that. That's not great.
No.
You want to be somewhere above 40, close to 50%. So I think that constant missing helped the judges. But Sal D'Amato, I'm not really sure what he was watching. I believe he's the one judge that scored it 4-1 for Dillashaw.
Whatever.
I don't disagree with him giving Dillashaw a nod, but 4-1? I don't see 4 rounds here for TJ Dillashaw. I don't.
Dave Ginsburg nailed it on the head, and I feel like he was the one person who paid attention during the fight. It's tough. What I did like about Dillashaw, because I don't want to sit here and just bash this guy, was that for the volume he threw in going 5 rounds, his cardio looked excellent.
Yeah, his cardio looked
I
knew
insane.
It would be there.
It almost looked like he was doing better cardio-wise come that 4th round than Dominic Cruz for a minute. Once we found out that Cruz has, plantar fasciitis or whatever in his foot, which may play into why he was getting tagged more as his footwork was going down, because that was his left foot, or his left foot which was his lead.
Well,
foot.
I made the joke that they're going to have an interim title fight with Cruz, or for Cruz, as Dillashaw will take on Faber because Cruz got hurt again. So he's going to be out for another year with the.
Oh, jeez. That's what Fertitta was giving him crap about in the ring, too. It was kind of interesting to see. But being said, I did read an interesting breakdown. It was maybe like 3 paragraphs from some amateur online, but he brought up some really good points about this fight and what Cruz did to win. Because a lot of folks are talking about how Cruz's striking, it looked really weird. And the fights didn't look so powerful. It's just as much as they were just counter punches. And the guy brought up that what Cruz is doing, and it's just like, he's like, oh, you got to kind of be a fighter to understand it. But he broke it down really well. And it's that what Cruz did is he set up this rhythm for the first few rounds where he'd come in, hit the 1-2, come out, come in, takedown. Come in, you throw, hit the 1-2, come out, takedown. Something like that. And he set this rhythm. At this point, Dillashaw's like, okay, this is what I'm expecting from Cruz. And then Cruz did something weird where he would break his inner metronome and he'd go off beat. So it'd be 1-2, come out, avoid, 1, takedown, come out. And the guy was saying, like, if you put a metronome up to the fight and watch, you can almost time what Cruz was going to do during those first few rounds. And it's like, it allowed TJ Dillashaw to settle in, and you saw him go back and forth, and that's why, you could see how it played out. But then he said he broke from that, and he says that's where it screws up a fighter's game, and that's where Cruz is really talented, is that now he can break that rhythm, and suddenly what you were comfortable with fighting, dude, now you're fighting a completely different style, because now this guy's doing a different rhythm on you, and where you're expecting something to be is no longer there because you're late by a split second.
Right.
And that's where he started sticking that counter jab.
I think for Dillashaw, looking at the breakdown of where the strikes went, of his 430 thrown, 343 were towards the head. And I think with his head movement, I think you maybe don't throw that much towards the head. And you look at his striking, he had significant output over Cruz to the body and to the legs with body kicks and body shots. And I think that's an area you got to use to beat Dominic Cruz, because I think trying to catch his head in the right place to knock him out is not going to happen. And I think throwing more leg kicks and body kicks may be a solution. And he said after the fight, it wasn't a kick that Dillashaw hurt his foot, but he goes, yeah, he kicked me and it hurt. And I think more diversity with the leg strikes also might have helped Dillashaw of the 430, not so much focusing on head hunting. And I think that was another thing. I think he got frustrated and made it a point of pride that I want to knock this guy out, and maybe search for the head too much when other things were working for him.
Especially, just a quick point, especially just what was probably frustrating for Dillashaw is just that he was head hunting, and then he would come in and he would get countered and take a shot to the face. And we see Dillashaw had more shots to the head than Cruz had more than
Cruz.
Dillashaw.
Majority of his shots, what was it, 312 thrown and 282 were to the head. So he only threw 30 strikes that weren't to the head.
And it's just like, that's frustrating. Just have a guy hit you in the head with the counter.
But Cruz broke him before the fight started with that, because when they're in those interviews in the pre-fight, Cruz is saying, hey, you're saying you can knock me out, but how are you going to hit me? Every time Dillashaw misses, he's thinking of that. He's thinking, this guy's right. And it's breaking him down more and more. Dillashaw's most significant strikes landing were those leg kicks. You could see how Cruz was taking them, and he's still searching for the head. And then another thing, I think at some point, him or his coach should have been like, hey, you keep chasing him down, getting countered. Let him come to you a little bit. Switch it up. Do something, because why are you going to chase him for 5? I can barely argue around for Dillashaw in this fight.
Too many chips on those shoulders from Dwayne and Dillashaw. Cruz has always been that nightmare for them.
Well, again, he wasn't that far off, TJ Dillashaw, from winning, I don't think. It's small things that could lead him to beat Dominic Cruz in the future. I don't think he got so blown out by Dominic Cruz that he could never beat him in the future. It's small things, and changing up to what his already great strategy is his output and his conditioning. So just small tweaks to that, and he could come back and beat Dominic Cruz. But if he fights the same exact way against Dominic Cruz in the future, he's not going to win.
No, and if you have that output and conditioning, you can do anything. So it's things he can change. But another point I want to think of, too, to switch off topic is, man, this is kind of sad for Cruz. If you think he can come back after 4 years or whatever it was and take on Dillashaw, where would he be considered in the greats of all time if he could have kept the belt this long?
If he would have if he would have won all the fights, I mean, he
would've
would have
been active.
probably broke Silva's record, I think, by now.
He would have had to have. I mean, what
Or
contenders would
pretty
he
darn
had?
close
Well,
to it.
If he, I'm of the firm opinion, if he either takes Dillashaw or Faber in a rematch, wins there, and defeats Mighty Mouse in a rematch, you could easily just throw him up in GOAT status. I mean, because the thing is, like, he went off that injury, but before that, everyone's like,
He'd
okay,
be like
this
the Ken
guy's
Griffey
a pound for
Jr. of MMA.
pretty much. I mean, when you look at it, it's just like before he took an injury, he was a pound for pound fighter, you know. And now when he comes back, and now that so many more people are starting to really appreciate the analysis and technical aspect of fight, people are starting to really, really see like, wow, Cruz is on another level. I think a couple title defenses, and immediately you could throw him back in the pound for pound, possibly GOAT talk, even just from sheer ability. He's Mayweather, basically.
He's changing fighting. We see how Dillashaw's fighting is a product of seeing his styles working, and now people are only going to do that more and more.
All right, before we end the show, just real quickly, and this is just one name answer. Dominic Cruz defends his title against blank next. Colin?
Uriah Faber.
Billy?
Uriah Faber.
I will also say Uriah Faber. It's the fight we've been wanting since the Ultimate Fighter Live, the three-peat. It has to happen. It's the best fight to sell. Dillashaw either waits or fights somebody else like a
You can fight as soon as
Thomas Almeida. Asunciao's still hurt. He was at the fight and he said, "Yeah, I don't mind someone else getting the shot because I'm still hurt." So probably Dillashaw Almeida or Dillashaw Aljamain Sterling.
Maybe Frank Yeager's first fight at 135.
We'll see. All right, he is Colin Camper. He runs our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. Of course, you're watching right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. So please like and subscribe to those social media outlets. He is Billy Brand. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21, and I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Thanks to all our partners at MMAFreak.com, MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca, MMASignaturesUSA.com, and TopRatedMMA.com as well. So for Colin and Billy, I am your host, Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.